Hi guys, can you hear me? Test. Hello? John?
Hey, Hannes.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
I was just wondering.
I've logged.
Go ahead.
I've logged into the Zoom and I'm putting up a screen share, a big reminder to use Meet Echo.
Okay. Otherwise,
There's
I can
one.
also drop a mail to the mailing list to tell people to use to remind them about the correct link.
Yeah, I did that last week. I'm hoping that people would remember,
okay.
but at least
Cool.
one person hasn't.
Excellent. Okay, cool. Let's wait a few minutes. Hi everyone. I see Bob, Brian, Tracy, Zachary. Thanks for joining. Okay. Good. Let me try to share the screen. Hey, Kian. Can you guys see my screen?
We can. It looks great.
Perfect. Okay, cool. Of course, now I can't see the attendees anymore and the chat window, but that's a separate story. So John, tell me when Hank and others are here, so we can actually start. We have 3 pull requests to look at. So that's, or at least let me check. No, they merged one already. That's excellent. There was actually 2. Kay provided 2 pull requests last week. I looked at them as well, and sort of edits to the use cases. So that was good. And Hank provided an additional use case based on what we discussed last week. And then apparently Steve had some other edits. So we can look at those and hopefully we can merge them so we have another version of the document or an updated version.
Muted. This is Monty. Is there a wouldn't it be a good time to discuss the firmware use case? I guess I kind of slipped through the
Excellent.
cracks.
Yeah. Actually, maybe we can also talk about that right now. I will wait till Hank joins so he can talk about his use case. But since we weren't able to look at yours last week, we should do that now. Do you want me to open something?
Yeah, I sent out a link. I'm trying to find it. I just had to interrupt another meeting, so
Okay.
I'm trying to locate it. But I sent that out. Find it
on SCITT, presumably.
PDF. Yeah.
That was.
No, it might have been a private discussion.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Then post it to the chat window.
Yeah, let me, because I'd initially posted it. No, it's on GitHub. It's actually on the old, I guess it was on the older site, use cases. Sorry.
John, do you happen to have the link? It's not here. No.
I should be able to
Didn't
grab it. I'm sorry, I'm still fighting with Zoom meetings. And
Yeah,
bringing people
actually, I
in.
did. I did.
Yeah, it's
put the
device
link here.
firmware. Yeah. Okay, you found it?
Yeah. Because I reviewed your firmware use case. Okay, can you see it? Does it show?
I can. Yeah, it does
Okay,
show
cool.
up. Yep.
Yeah, go ahead. Talk about it.
Oh, you want to do it now? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thought we were still agenda bashing. Okay. Yeah. So
The screen
that-
yet? We're still seeing the notes. In case you were thinking of sharing the
I'm
use
sorry?
case.
I'm,
No, I was
I'm
just saying-
sharing the use case. Yeah.
Yeah, but we're seeing the screen, right? Or is everybody else?
So
Oh, I'm seeing it. Sorry, my bad. Yeah,
I'm
I'm just
seeing the use
clicking through the
case.
tool. Yeah, my apologies. I see it now.
Yeah. Let me post it also into the chat window. Sorry, that's now a little bit of mess. So okay, ready.
Yeah. Are you showing the PDF version of the? Yeah, you are. Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it built slightly different than the Markdown version.
Yep.
All right. So the purpose of this is to basically, kind of educate the reader that there's other pieces of software on the machine besides the stuff that we see that's visible post boot, and that's the operating system. We think of the operating system and the software that's running on it, stuff that's visible to the user. But there's an awful lot of code, in fact, probably millions of lines of code that actually run and are gone by the time the OS begins to load. And then some of this is even continuing to run, especially on an x86 PC. You've got things like SMI handlers and things like that that are even running while the operating system it continues to run with actually a higher privilege than the operating system has.
It's actually
So
same as well.
I'm sorry.
It's not an x86 unique concept. It's this for A-class processors, A-class processor. It's the same. There's also some similar stuff.
Oh, okay, good. I didn't want to speak for that, but I only familiar with the x86 obviously. But thanks for that enlightenment. That's good. So somebody might be interested in understanding. And by the way, this stuff boots with extremely high privilege. It does things like, and I go into an explanation a little bit down here, but it even does very high privilege things like configure memory. The memory is configured and locked. Again, I'm going to speak to the x86. I'm familiar with it, but I'm sure other architectures do the same. The memory configuration actually has a number of security related issues. OEMs, especially in the horizontal market, tend to get very clever about how they configure memory, optimized for one architecture versus another. And it's up to the early firmware to actually perform that configuration. We have actually seen aliases getting created where two physical, what appear to be physical memory locations, actually go to the same actual physical location, and this could have some security implications. So somebody might want to really understand in the same way we think about supply chain assurance for the OS and applications. You might want to think about supply chain assurance for the stuff that runs prior to the operating system and even continues to run during the operating system. So that's kind of the introduction. Any questions or challenges to that, to the necessity of this?
For me, it makes total sense what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and again, so scrolling down on this table here, again, I want to be speaking to a great degree on x86 architecture, and that with the TPM trusted platform module. You know, and so you can kind of break it down into these seven seven architectures, and they're roughly broken down. If you look at the PC client spec for the TPM, they're roughly broken down like this, although not entirely. But you've got the initial boot vector, which is the very early part of the boot cycle. Memory configuration, you've got, you know, the loading of the runtime code, in this case SMM, and UEFI runtime executable. You got full boot mode that's running, and then moving on, you know, up to the higher levels. I wanted to break this down kind of logically and by boot cycle stages. And typically we only really see, you know, reference layer 6 and 7, right? We don't see the layer reference 1 through 1 through 5 at all. So kind of scrolling down, then what we've done, kind of scroll down to the table, I guess. Let's go down to the actual diagrams. Yeah.
Do you want me to move to the diagram?
Yeah, I just moved to the diagram. That'll be a little.
Okay, this one.
And then some of the details are up there. So here I'm gonna dive into specifically how the TPM deals with this, and TPM is widely available on almost all Windows and Linux-based x86 systems. What we've done is created this concept. How do you measure this? How do you record the evidence of this stuff? And after all, it's going to be gone by the time the OS boots, or most of it. How do you actually have any visibility to this? And how the TPM does this is starting on the very left, you know, with the early reset of the system. At the reset vector, at the same time you run the reset vector, the platform is required to be designed to also reset the TPM. And part of resetting the TPM, we've got these set of registers in them called platform configuration registers. And essentially how they worked is, I actually scroll just a little bit, maybe do a level to the section, right there, right there. Yeah, and so, no, where it says measurement operation, just to kind of level set. What a PCR is the size of a hash, whatever you decide it's going to be. Originally started with SHA-1, and most of them are all SHA-256 or 3D4. The operation can be shown in the bottom formula. Is, of course, it starts with 0, starts with the value 0. And an extend operation, there's no write to a PCR, there's only an extend. An extend operation is take internally within the TPM. It takes the existing PCR value, which is a reset 0, and you append it with the value that you're extending, and then you hash that and replace the PCR. You know, very blockchain kind of recording of a log with a very scarce resource. We knew that we couldn't keep the hash of all of these events. There's could be, depending on the implementation, hundreds of them. But this actually does keep inside a single PCR a non-tamperable record of everything that's happened during the boot process. So you have to understand that the concept of the PCR and extending in order to make sense. So now if you can scroll down, what we do, and in this kind of very simplistic world, and I've simplified this down to one PCR, I can explain the rationale for more than one later, but just to get the one in, as you go through this boot cycle, you start with the PCR 0 being 0, PCR being 0, and prior to going to the next block of code that you're going to execute, and this is very common in the boot cycle, a very sequential boot. In fact, most of the time the CPU is single-threaded. You're going to measure it. You're going to measure it simply is you take a hash of that module, and then you perform the above operation with it, and then that is now recorded into the PCR. And you can keep doing that infinite number of times. And what you end up with is a immutable record of exactly what happened getting to the end state. If you'll notice, there's actually two operations that go on. The first is the extend operation into the TPM, but you might also want, and this is what's really important for this working group, you might also want to keep a richer record outside in memory on disk, or if you probably at the early boot you don't have a disk, a record of what you actually extended, which is a hash of the module that you were about to execute. So what you end up with is a sequence of these event log records, which by the magic of hashing and extending, you can then verify is accurate, because these records are out in unprotected space. But you can go along and verify that, in fact, these are the records that were extended into the TPM as the thing progressed, and nobody downstream can modify them without being detected. So what I now have at boot time is a rich set of records of exactly how this thing booted up. So what we have is the diagram below it. Scroll down just where it says verification. We now have the ability to get a source of these measurements. We call them RIMs, for reference integrity measurements. We have the ability to get RIMs from a source, for example, the device manufacturer, platform manufacturer, that says, okay, this is what it should look like. When I booted my machine in the factory, when I developed it, this is how it looked, and this is how it better look when you get it, right? And so what we have now is the ability to have a verifier that can get these event logs from memory, which of course at this point are not trusted, because they can be transferred, they can be stored in memory, they can be stored on the disk. Anybody can tamper with them, but there's an operation called a quote inside the TPM, and the quote is, probably should have provided a little more detail in the diagram, but a quote is simply a signed value of the PCR from inside a private key that's inside the TPM. So now I have the end state of that PCR, however number extends there were, and all I really need to do is replay this event log. And if I replay this event log, and it exactly matches this PCR, which I now trust because it was signed, nobody can tamper with it, I can now verify that the event log that represents everything that happened from the reset vector, I can compare that against the measurement, or what would be called the supply chain. The term RIM predates long before any of these efforts in IETF. So we're calling RIMs for now. Can now verify against a well-known record from a trusted source. And so that's pretty much, there's a lot of links, but that's really a summary of verifying the early boot or initial boot of the platform, and how it can take part, especially using the TPM, but there's probably other technologies out there as well. Supply chain assurance of the early boot cycle of the machine. And of course, as you have BIOS updates, we're expecting the platform manufacturers, device manufacturers, to, along with the BIOS update, that would be, of course, they would modify the early boot portions, and they would produce a new version of the supply chain information.
So Monty,
anyway, that was a lot.
That's good. Like I see, like where as I wrote in my review, I think there's a little bit more text needed in terms of like what SCITT would be doing, and I see two aspects here from your description, and they are probably separable. You could one is the fact that you make the different vendors that provide firmware, low-level software, would make those, at least the metadata of those, publicly available through the notary service / ledger. That's one, which then allows you to find out like what software is around, what's the latest version, and to make that sort of visible to everyone in the supply chain. The other aspect, and I think that's the second part that you talked about, is to actually have these RIMs, so reference integrity values or measurements, sort of uploaded as well, so that you can use that the ledger in combination by the verifier to actually dip into those and compare those values. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, and I think going even further beyond that, we think there's going to be some manufacturers that actually produce it from the source, and that would be great. But there are a lot of manufacturers, even systems today, that are out there that have this capability, but were produced prior to the manufacturer producing these RIMs or reference measurements. I think that there's room for independent, because everything that I've done here can be obtained. You don't have to be the manufacturer to obtain this. If you had a system, say you bought a system, or you had a manufacturing floor that had 5,000 of these systems already, right? What you could do is take one of them that you trust has not been tampered with, which, if you're worried about pre attacks on the firmware, you could take one that hasn't been tampered with directly from the source. Perform all of these operations yourself. There's nothing in here that requires the actual manufacturer visibility into the BIOS. All this information is available on a standard Linux system, for example. So there's no reason this has to come from the actual manufacturer. Somebody could be producing these on their own. That's where I think the real value, or among the values for SCITT, would be. Someone says, hey, I've looked at this, I've examined this BIOS, it's got this particular set of components, has nothing that I'm looking for as far as threats go, and I'm going to put these values onto a ledger somewhere because I've looked at them, or multiple people have looked at them. That's where I think some of the value. If you just simply want to trust the manufacturer, they're all going to sign these. Yeah, okay, you put them on the ledger itself. But I think the real value is other people looking at this as well.
Right. And I think that's you going further down. Like, I think that's where we still need a little bit of text. So what I would do is, and I don't see if anyone else raises his hand, but to sort of shorten the description above a little bit, but then extend this text, the SCITT use case or the SCITT sort of benefits a little bit to explain what you just said, or to capture that here.
Yeah. My strategy was, at least verbally, make sure, before I spent a whole lot of time thinking that through, have this discussion that we're having now and your write-up before I move to the next stage. But no, I agree.
Sense.
There's a lot of background. And maybe I can link to it, because I think it is important for someone that doesn't understand this to have some document that does explain it. But you're right. This 2 or 3 sentences is not sufficient as a SCITT use case.
Of course. Okay.
So Hannes, I had a question here. So Monty, when you were talking, you said this is typically single-threaded as part of this startup. What is the modification here if it's multi-threaded? Like, how do we make this reproducible?
I don't see why multi-threaded would make a difference during the boot cycle. So there is a sequence number inside them. The BIOS is required to keep some order of how it happened. So one might have to understand, if it became multi-threaded, that these events might not always be in that sequence, but that can always be verified using the PCR. The PCR would still verify them. So it's a good point. The verifier would need to know in a multi-threaded fluid environment that if they look at the system 2 different times, depending on what's going on, say a cold boot versus a warm boot, I think that would be classic. You got disk drives that are already spinning up and they can respond faster on a warm boot than on a cold boot, right? So that might lead to these events happening. So they can't just look at the sequence, the assumed sequence. They have to actually look at the real sequence that they're given, and that would be a good thing to point out. Does that help?
Yes, but I was just trying to figure out how the hell you validate those if the sequences are out of order. You
Well,
can't reproduce.
So the event log, the PCR is still going to reflect the actual sequence things were measured in. So that's still going to be verifiable. What the verifier shouldn't assume in your scenario is that when they look at the first system, they actually have to make sure that they verify the sequence as it's been given to them by that system and not assume it's the same sequence as previous systems they've looked at.
Okay. Are you going to put that in this document somewhere?
That's a good addition, yes.
Thanks, Monty.
Okay. Any other hands up also? Questions?
Is it okay to, there actually is a TCG document,
Mhm.
that published document that describes this, so I don't have to put all this detail in here.
Yeah, we can
Would it be
reference.
sufficient to point to that instead of putting all this? Then I could really focus. I just wanted
Totally.
everything in one document
No,
for
no,
this discussion,
yeah.
but I
No,
can
no,
certainly
totally.
point to that document.
Yeah, please do so. Like, we don't need to replicate, and specifically, like, if we can keep it at a level that people get the story, and if they care about the details, then they go over to the other document. It will be unavoidable if someone wants to understand all the details to go to
Yeah.
other documents anyway. I think that's
Yeah,
by
that's
design.
got a lot.
Good.
That's got a lot more detail than what's in
Yeah,
this 40,000 foot view. Yeah.
yeah. Cool. Did Hank join in the meanwhile?
Yep.
Still can't see it.
I see.
He has
I
his
am
hand
in
up.
the queue.
Oh, excellent. Do you want to queue to talk about? Should we switch over to your
No,
pull request,
I'm
or
queuing
you
for the
want to talk
topic.
about this?
I want to talk about this.
Okay, go.
Hi, Monty.
Hi, Hank.
Okay, sorry for delaying your stage time here. That was kind of a awkward thing. Sorry about that. Having said that, I can speak now from experience, having had one-on-one sessions with Dick Brooks, who is not here today, I see, but it's close to Christmas. So maybe we can spin off. Maybe this week, I don't know what your Christmas plans are for right now, but maybe you can spin off a one-on-one and then create crisp facets of this use case here that would align with the current phrasing in the use case document. And we don't have to limit this to 2, but my initial intuitive target would be like spinning off 2 crisp use cases here that would maybe even abstract a little bit from TCG work, but can reference TCG work, but highlight the actual issue, what customers, so the consumer of the software needs, and why standardization is useful in this scope. So would that be something you feel useful? Is useful?
Yeah, it very much would be. And regarding my plans, I was actually planning on taking most of the week off, but my CTO informed me on Friday he had different plans for me. So, so I will actually be working this week. So
okay,
yeah,
so
probably
I'm
not next week,
available.
but this week we could meet.
Yeah, maybe something like, I don't know if TC is meeting, so if after IWG or something, whatever.
Nothing in TCG is happening this week. At least on my side, I killed everything for the meetings.
Yeah, okay, then let's do this offline, find a good time. And yeah, so Dick was pretty satisfied with the outcome. So that was, so I have 1 out of 1 use cases where this happens, right? So maybe we should just repeat that experience. Yeah, okay, let's check that online then. Okay.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
do email.
Yeah, please get something put together and submit it as a PR. That would be excellent to make progress on this topic. But
Okay.
yeah, thanks, Monty, for contributing that write-up.
Yeah.
As someone who like works on low-level software, obviously the use case resonates with me.
Okay, thanks.
Okay,
Well,
Hank,
unfortunately, as I mentioned, my CTO had different plans for me, so I had to bow out of a meeting that he's running. So if I'm not needed right, I just wanted to make sure this was discussed, but I need to leave at this point.
Bail back. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Hank,
Send me an email, Hank. We'll coordinate. Thanks.
is there someone else in the
Definitely.
queue
See you
who
soon.
wants to talk? Hank?
I don't think so. No, I'm just
Okay.
my mic is just open, but I'm not in the queue. So I'm basically shouting across the room right now.
Oh, cool. Hank, it's okay if we switch over to yours, because I would really like to merge, or at least if the content is acceptable, merge this one and also the other PR from Steve. Should we talk about this one?
So this PR is now a lot of things, right? So so we have the that's one of the prominent ones. This is from Dick Brooks and mine. That's last iteration. So we have a very clunky title here. All of this is not targeted at being super readable, but capturing the essence of what we try to talk about. So I think everything that is refactoring here is probably wording, getting this more crisp, getting this less clunky. But so the first draft is targeted at having all the content in and getting the idea across. So this is the second use case I was refining with Dick, and I think that happened pretty well. I think you already, Hannes, created an issue on the two offload items, yeah? Maybe I'm off. Maybe that's another one. I'm not entirely sure right now which one you commented on.
On a different one.
Exactly. So yeah. So I basically also transmogrified three of the items in your email, of your recent email, into 3 issues. Specifically, the 3 items that were about things that I added. So I created issues from them, not about the things you commented on Yogesh's item. I refrained from elaborating on that. So yeah, but this here is, I hope, readable at least. And that's the most important thing, because then we can bash it and make it better.
Do you want to give a short summary of what you did? Like you talked about it last week, but just as a recap.
Yeah, so the base idea here is stemming from the App Store scenario, which we started with, and we up-leveled it a little bit, so it's more abstract now. So also talking about an App Store was like limiting it basically to, I don't know, the whole vertical owners that are very prominent in cell phones, and so because they use the term App Store somehow, and we wanted to highlight what's the actual problem behind that example. I want to call it example here right now. And that's typically that we have a lot of thresholds. And I think the consumer release software once highlight is good, but there's something here like the third or fourth sentence, discovery of all sources of statements and or identify authority entities creating sibling costs. So that's the thing. Sometimes getting all the information about a software is not feasible for everybody. Sometimes you're getting in a situation when you only have a lot of revenue, a lot of money, you can bear a lot of cost. Then it's possible for you to get all the data and find it, because it takes time and money to find them, and that is kind of creating an unfair advantage for the big companies, so to speak, right? So what we want to do here is to make discovery of these authoritative entities and what they are issuing more easily accessible, and reduce that cost. So, and that is manifesting and offloading some burden, right? So you now have entities taking on that burden instead of you, and you just consume the output. I think that's one of the big things here. And with respect to the App Store, of course, the App Store in this specific example would have a certain opinion and endorsing certain things, and like even explicitly not endorsing other things or just being silent about it. And that is just one source. So I think the other thing here, which again is effective, is cost, but it's a discovery of all relevant sources. So We had some hyperbole examples that are just from politics. You know, if you're looking at the environment, and oil companies have different opinions than, or fossil fuels companies have different opinions than Greenpeace. So Greenpeace definitely wants to reference endorsements from big oil, but maybe you might think situation where big oil is not as interested in referencing Greenpeace all the time, right? So so if you find one repository, you find a biased set of reference to the other, and you find the other repository, you find a biased reference to the other. So so you have to find both repositories basically for statements, and then look at them, and then make your own decision which one is actually interesting to you. Like, are you more interested in, I don't know, selling fossil fuels or into protecting the environment? And then you might come with different decisions here. So this decision-making process basically is inhibited if you can't find all these statements. Well, I just used a very probably politically incorrect example here, but still, the point is valid. I think that this discovery mechanism has to be somewhere in here, and that is the inhibitor here is cost. And for the consumer software, we want to reduce the effort, aka cost, to make informed decisions. I think this is what this use case is about.
Cool. Okay. So I don't know exactly where the text is. That's why I've been scrolling around a little bit, but yeah, but somewhere in here, because you have made a lot of changes.
Yeah, but a lot of changes are through use cases. So this is second use case. All the green boxes basically highlight where new bullet points is. So checking the history of statements by auditors was the thing that I promised. So I was promising three things. I was promising getting the App Store use case in. That's what we just talked about.
Yeah.
Getting an auditor use case in. That's this one here, right? So auditors have sometimes a hard time, again, finding all the relevant statements, but also the history of statements. Like, did this change? What's the current status of this? Where are we right now? Also, there are explicit examples here in the text, like examples of procedure results, in this case for compliance checking, for example, or important to audits, include A, available, fresh, and applicable code reviews, B, certification documents like FIPS and common criteria, C, virus scans, D, vulnerability disclosure reports, which can refer to fixed or unfixed issues, and then E, security impact applicability justification statements, why this software is okay to run. And so this is there's 5 prominent examples in the example lists what auditors have to deal with. And when you already only look at this 5 example set, then you realize that's probably a lot of different formats. It's probably for humans to read. You know, it's hard to parse that. It's hard to understand how this works. So auditors run into this issue of having this, they're like experts in their own assessment domain, but necessarily expert in the discovery, relevance, finding it all, and then parsing it and getting it somehow in your report domain. So an auditor needs to have a clear audit trail. I was trying to not to use the term audit trail here, but I wrote something like after the fact and long-term availability, right? So that's that's where standardization kicks in the second green box. And so this is about people that are not only wanting to avert danger and have real concerns about risks and want to be secure, but this is more about the compliance and external regulation checking. Sometimes there's some oversight governance, and that requires you to do things or adhere to things, and then you have to pay money to people to official certificate auditors to actually check for that, and that's not uncommon, and that's a very costly procedure, and we can help with that, and that is why a consumer wants some things here. So a consumer expects when they come into this audit situation that it's not a cost explosion. Again, cost is really a problem here, and cost always relates to effort and discoverability and how much you have to pay to get it all into one document, because you get with pictures, PDFs, whatever. It might be relatively heterogeneous what you have to process here. And then the standardization section again goes into why this is useful, what can be done, what values would come from standardization here. I think it's pretty straightforward, but I think thorough review is required still. So happy to get a lot of bashing here, especially with the bullet points. For example, Kay bashed my last one where we used the term endorsement, which is an architecture term, and she rigorously eliminated that, right? Putting it back to layman's terms, to neutral terms. I think that's very important that we have neutral terms here. And so this hasn't happened here. So yet I hope that people find something that they don't like and then make it better.
Cool.
Tracy has her hand up here.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's sort of related, but not directly. So I'm happy to wait. But yeah, for those of you who don't know me, I am community chair for the SIG-Store community meetings, and Zach's my colleague, he mentioned you're talking case studies, and I have some case studies. I've been working with folks in the SIG-Store community, and I definitely see some overlap with the ones mentioned here. So I was going to highlight some of those and maybe ask where the best place to feature them was. But I'm happy to wait. If folks want to go into specifics, feedback for this, I can go after.
No, that's good. Have you written them up somewhere already, or are you in the process of writing them?
Well, if I can share my screen, or if you can click on this link, I can show you.
Yeah, let me try to do that.
Should I share or should I send you the links?
Ideally, if you could share,
okay, I'll do it
give
again.
it a try.
Yeah, click the button.
This looks like there's something has happened still on the sharing side.
Yeah, it asked to share a deck, but I want to share my screen. How do I do that?
Under your name, in the top left, there's a screen icon between the document and the camera item. I think that's the one you're probably using right now.
Yeah, so I click that. I've been given permission now.
You have no permissions, or?
I think it gave me permission, but it didn't give me which screen to select. So I'm just trying to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, while you're trying, Tracy, so welcome on board. That's great if you can associate with existing use cases. There's always the decision to make to add your details that are interesting to you to existing ones, or to kind of shape a new use case that's different from the others and gets its own item. So whatever you have as a requirement is very welcome here. And yeah, I think there are two lanes again: adding to existing or adding your own whole new item.
So while
Tracy, just note that there's both a share slides and a share screen icon to click on.
Yeah, different.
Okay,
different
yeah, I think.
So while that's happening, Hank,
I've asked for permission again. Could you go ahead and check if the request is there? I think it needs to be approved.
Really? Okay.
Hank, so why is Kay pushing back on terminology? The whole point of these use cases is to try and get terminology out there, so start working our way through this. And I'm a little reticent if people are trying to clamp down on terminology prematurely yet.
Now it works.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, Tracy, you are visible, and I quickly will answer Roy's question. So there's the thing that use cases should use layman's terms. They should not their colloquial language intentionally. And I was using the term endorsement that's already overloaded by rats and potentially by text that will be included in the architecture So the most simple language is useful for use cases because they explicitly are not using architecture language. They're just layman's words of or layman's expressions to explain what the problem is, and then we can derive requirements from them, and then we can say, and this terminology does that. Yeah,
I understand the requirements mining. I just don't want to allow the discussion to say, hey, let's dumb it down, restrict terminology overlap with rats, because the verticals have their own terminology, and saying, hey, the way to work through this is why I wrote the terminology document is that we can't allow things to squat until we have a great picture on things here. I have no problem with endorsement, and trying to dumb it down to rats always is not what I want to do here. I want to get the landscape so we can see what people are using, because if people are doing the terminology, that's not helping the discussion.
Yeah, but I don't see a big problem with case studies. I thought they were a contribution, not a obsession on terminology, to be honest. So I'm pretty okay with that. If we can revisit that at some point. So we are not stuck with the current version. Yeah.
Throw something out without raising my hand. Bob Martin here. I think, you know, as Hank started out with, he had gotten in a little too deep in his terminology in something that shouldn't have been using anyone's terminology. It should have been neutral because it's a use case. I think the discussion, Roy, that you want to get will be after that, and there we will use the languages of the different communities and figure out how to resolve them.
Okay, I'm ready if when.
Yeah.
Yep. Please.
Tracy.
Yeah.
Yeah. You did your time. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so in this is a landscape of SIGSTO, but the part I want to focus on is the case studies in the bottom right. And I did drop this link into the chat if folks want to follow along. But basically, if you click on each one, you'll see a link out to a specific case study. So one of the things I wanted to call out, like I think there's overlap with some of the things mentioned. So for example, the one on Rancher, this is Rancher Government Solutions, and they talk about kind of dealing with air gap customers and the places they ended up using SIGSTO in those environments. Some of the other ones, like DB Schenker is a logistics company, Verizon is looking at 5G, Edgeless Systems is operating in kind of the confidential computing area. So like, while I don't think like the case studies focus on the adoption, the journey, I think we could extract the specific use cases perhaps in a format that works, and then maybe kind of link to the case studies as just a reference. But yeah, just wanted to highlight these and how folks are using them, and then see what's the best way to kind of incorporate it with the use case work you're all doing.
So this is actually something awesome, because the very latest use case we added is about air gap, literally. And if you have similar requirements, we can, for example, I know I'm so in this month in December I'm in charge of the use case document. I'm not sure how this will continue in January, but I will not just disappear. So what we could do is, for example, take this obvious one that you just highlighted with the air gap. Look at our air gap scenario and then enhance it. You get all your requirements that are vital to you into a crisp, because you know these are like, I can already see 4 paragraphs. So for our use case document, it might be a little bit too verbose, but maybe the key messages are smaller and more concise. And if we can split some of those out and then include them, for example, into the existing air gap scenario, or we realize, okay, there are actually 2 air gap scenarios, we can make that editorial decision pretty much as soon as you like, and then go from there. So I'm free for calls until the day before Christmas, literally this year, and but also next year. So no pressure, and we can definitely go into a first one. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that works really well for the air gapped, and some of the other ones we can pull into separate one, like there's an edgeless system one, which is on confidential computing, which is something I only learned about recently through the folks using it. Could that be a standalone one, perhaps?
Yeah, we have a lot of confidential compute enthusiasts here in this group, and sure.
Just,
yeah.
So the interesting thing there, as soon as we get into confidential compute, we definitely straddle the boundaries between, or the two different technologies of RATS and SCITT. And I think calling that out as a separate one is great. We just have to make sure that we work with both groups to make sure we're clear as to where one starts and the other one ends.
Yeah, that's true. So there's existing technology. Sorry for this. There's existing technology we have to a little bit back off from. And yes, confidential compute is about sometimes the proof of validity of the running code. That's different from what SCITT provides. So we are complementary. But in order to find it out, I think we have to spell it out first. I think that's the most important thing, to write it on first. Yeah. Actually, it also fits in with Monty's document, which is firmware, which is you kind of need those building blocks to get to a tested boot for a confidential compute container anyway. So I guess there's three things out of that. One, is there anything missing from Monty's document in this space where RATS fits in with the confidential compute space, and whatever else is missing.
Nice. Yeah, maybe one thing I could do is we can discuss it on the mailing list and like get more feedback like this, and then see what makes sense. And I think there's 4 or 5 different topics there, so happy to set up new threads or jump in on the existing ones. I can see, but yeah, just coming up to speed with it, with what you're all doing. It looks good.
Yeah, it's definitely a great idea, and let's have a look at those use cases. I unfortunately didn't notice them before you shared the link, so that's great. Yeah, having
no worries.
it on the mailing list as well is good. And since you guys posted some links, I was actually wondering, since Kay is not here, has someone, Kiran, have you taken some notes in the meeting minutes by any chance?
So I'm actually following the notes here. So somebody was taking notes, so I don't want to like jump in and interfere.
Okay, that's excellent. Okay, yeah, I was just worried that I have to sort of like then watch the recording and then recreate the notes. But so excellent. Whoever did it, thanks a lot. Oh, John, you did it. No, Brian.
I think so. Brian.
Anyway, whoever did it, that's great. Thank you. That's good. So we have we'll have lots more use cases to look into. Good. How should we best proceed? So, Steve, do you want to say a few words about your pull request as well? So you had a pull request number 5 in that list. Do you want to briefly go over this, or because you made a number of changes? Is Steve actually
I'm not
here?
sure Steve is here. No, I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, Hannes, I can briefly speak about K's second PR, the summarization of problem summary. So, Hank, did you get a chance to review that?
Yes, I did review that. It is a non-conflicting merge. It was an addition, which is basically a summary of the other use cases. So I said, ship it and pulled it in. You can always elaborate on that. It's literally a draft. So all this is in high churn mode right now. And I saw no danger in having a summarization chapter here. And this is a starting point. She called it a placeholder. And I found a placeholder be non-conflicting with any other work and approved the merge.
Yeah, I looked at it as well. Yeah, I talked to her on Friday about her 2 PRs. So those are good edits. So it's always welcome if someone actually goes through and cleans up the text because there's often some inconsistency introduced. And in this case, this PR we just talked about was a summary, so that's good as well. But Steve's PR, can you talk about that too, or is that because it was mostly editorial changes for like improving the text overall, the flow?
Yeah, unfortunately, Steve was out most of last week, so I hadn't had a chance to like talk to him about it. But I'll shoot him a message. I think he's back this week, so I'll try and sync with him on that.
Okay. Well, I would almost lean forward just accepting this one. Is like I read through it. There wasn't anything like content changes in there. I was just trying to improve the language, and I trust Steve's English definitely better than mine. So, Hank, what should we do? We have a few minutes left. What should we do with your PR?
Now that Tracy highlighted that she could contribute to a lot of areas, I also think it's. I would repeat your recent sentiment here that pull things are more visible than things that are just in branches. So personally, I would say merge it for now. This is a draft and therefore subject to change. But I think in main it's more visible. It hasn't received a lot of review with respect to the recent editions yet. So the other one, which did. So also we are at Christmas time. So my answer would be as soon as possible with respect to there's Christmas and New Year's Eve approaching. Maybe we will give when we go into hiatus of holidays, give people the chance to review the PR. And on the before the first session, I make a check on how much feedback we got. If there was 0 feedback, this also counts for. This is not controversial. We put it in, and if that creates controversy, then we just create new issues on it. Right? It's a draft. So, but I would not merge it right now. Even it's less visible because there has actually there's a lot of review missing. The other one an extensive review. And so I would keep it as a PR for now. And then, is it a PR actually?
Yeah, it is a PR.
It is, okay, wonderful. Yeah.
But maybe you could merge, I think you have, or John, the edits from Steve, because they are uncontroversial. Let's leave yours open, ask for some review, and then at the same time, we are going to review the use cases on Schenker and Autodesk and Rancher and so on, edgeless systems on the list. And then when we meet again at the beginning of next year, we can then sort of like conclude on those and incorporate and whatever will come out of the discussion.
Okay, so what I hear is that we would merge Steve's edits into final merge. Now I have to look at final merge because I think he branched from branch.
Oh man.
And final merge would be from Yogesh. And let's look at this.
Oh, that's not great.
And Yogesh's thing is a bunch of conflicts at the moment.
Well, we will maybe have to offline sort this out. He probably picked the wrong branch. That can happen. But anyway, I think we are approaching the end of the hour. And this is our last call for this year. So I think I'm speaking also for John. I'm happy that you guys were so engaged in the discussions, like since the group was started, and I think we are making some progress. And I see the use case architecture things moving along. So with that, I wish you a happy Christmas and also happy New Year. And we see each other again at the beginning of next year. Let me look when the next call is.
So Tracy, you still have your hand up. Are you finished? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, and if you want to have some discussion beforehand bilaterally this year, again in December, I'm a little bit in charge of this document, and just reach out. Otherwise, I think your idea to emit a lot of links to the list is great, because then people can follow that and read up. So whatever you feel comfortable with, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm also, for what it's worth, I'm also still around till the end of the year, and so if you have any questions, so just drop me an email. I will also review the use cases that they were just talked about.
Anas, Dick has his hand up.
Okay. Hey, Dick.
Johannes, yeah, likewise, happy holidays to you all. So I did drop another possible use case onto the email list. I'm not putting it into any of the documentation yet. I just want to see if there's any feedback or any support or not support for the concept. So this one I sent out was for registering trust scores. Thank you.
I think that
Yeah,
was it.
I yet have to review the use case, but yeah, thank you. Thanks for pointing this out, Dick.
I want to thank everybody. Happy holidays.
Take care, everyone.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Likewise.
Bye bye.
Stay
Thank you all.
safe.